It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Kohl.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Kohl. In the studio today, I'm happy to welcome back George W. Owings III. He's the Secretary of Maryland's Department of Veterans Affairs, and Dana Hendrickson, who's the Director of Outreach and Advocacy for the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs. Thank you both for joining me again.
Don, it's great to be back with you again. We're excited anytime we get to visit you here.
And thank you for the opportunity to be here as well.
It's my pleasure. Okay, so both of you are well aware we have concluded the 438th session of the General Assembly, which convened on January 10th. It ended April 9th. And there was a lot of legislation for and on behalf of veterans. That's our main topic, our main focus. What got through, what didn't, what are you happiest with, what do you want to revisit?
Well, I think actually there were about 80-some bills that, including the cross files that went through. And as you said, some made it and some didn't. And we are happy for both sides of that coin. There are bills that were submitted that we absolutely could not lift had they passed. Some had some heavy fiscal notes with them. And it's unfortunate. A lot of times the caucus does not run by us those bills that impact the department, well-intended as they are. But in the future, we're going to ask them to simply run them by us first. One of the biggest bills that has been one of the governor's pushes since he came into office was the income subtraction modification bill. He has been striving for the 100% reduction, and his goal is to not only do the veterans, but also first responders, police, EMTs, EMS, correctional officers, and people of that nature. But the bill, while it doesn't have his name on it, and he doesn't care about the ownership of it, did pass. It was Delegate Lasante's bill, added another $5,000 now, bringing the total to $15,000. It also did something else that we were happy to see. It reduced the age requirement from the 65 for the second $5,000 and this $5,000 now to 55.
Okay, let's explain what it does from the beginning, what this bill does.
So if you are a retiree from the military, that income that you receive now is exempt for the first $15,000, provided you are 55 years of age or older. Mm-hmm. If you are not 55 yet, if you got in at 18 and retired at 48 or some 38 or 48, whatever, you don't get anything past the first $5,000. Okay. So it's a time-sensitive kind of thing, age-sensitive kind of thing. So that was a very important bill to us, to the veteran community, and there's some 50,000 retirees in the state that
Absolutely.
We want to keep and retain their services and their credentials and everything. There's another bill. Last year, Senator Simon Ayer out of Pasadena passed the what we call the
Veteran Service Animal Program Fund, right?
That's
yep.
the name of it. So this year he came back, and he, for those that are so generous in mind that want to help, they have the option of allowing us to put their name on the website for their donation. But that bill is underway. Dana spent a great deal of time on it last year that she can tell you about in establishing the fund itself and setting up the parameters for it. Delegate Wilson out of Southern Maryland put in the Public Institutions of Higher Education. It's a priority registration for members of the armed forces.
Which means 4 classes I would get, you would get.
That's exactly
first
right.
Dibs at a class before it fills out.
That's exactly right. And it further reaches into any veteran who is within 15 years of the eligible active duty service. Another one by Delegate Young out of the Towson area, I believe, is a health, vital statistics, veterans and armed services members suicide reporting. That is so hard to get a handle on because...
Yeah, and I didn't realize that. The health department has not been...
Has never done it. There has been no requirement on that, but Delegate Young's bill now requires it. Dana's going to talk a little bit at length about that in a moment. She sits on the governor's commission.
For our listeners, what that's going to do is make the health department provide to the public and you the statistics on active duty.
Well, not just active duty,
veterans?
but veterans themselves,
okay.
Yes. Because that, and again, Dana has some startling numbers, and they're pretty provocative, actually,
that
when you hear them.
That have taken their lives by
Yes,
suicide.
and the age groups that are in this mix, but more than that, the female veteran as well. I think you're going to find that's pretty powerful information she has. We have yet another one, Delegate Walden Stricker of Montgomery County has a Veteran Employment Transition Success Program, and it establishes a employment transitions program for veterans transitioning to health occupations. Again, that requires us to establish a fund and to help those with their certifications and licensing and registration. That's a good move because it deals specifically in the health area. And one other one I wanted to highlight.
So that's a win-win because there's not enough health workers and veterans getting jobs right now.
And with what's going on at the federal level, it's even becoming more critical because a lot of the doctors are simply leaving. They're not sticking with the health side of the VA, and that number is coming to the forefront now. One other one I did want to highlight is the disabled veteran interviews for non-competitive appointments, and that changes the language from authorizing to requiring state-appointed authorities to interview disabled veterans.
And why is that important?
Well, because so many times in the mix of things, the disabled veteran gets left behind for assortment of reasons. Whether they're physical or whether they're mental. And this kind of sets the stage for a nice format for the disabled veteran to get a shot early on.
So it could be a red flag by reading it and writing this veteran has depression.
Yes.
But face-to-face, it could be a whole different story.
Exactly right. And you are well aware of how that works. So those are some of the bills that we wanted to highlight.
Very good. We're going to take a short break. This is Donna Kohl on the 1430 Connection. We will be right back. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Kohl. In the studio with me today is Secretary George Owings III. He is the Secretary of Maryland's Department of Veterans Affairs, and Dana Hendrickson, who's the Director of Outreach and Advocacy for the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs. We just talked about a bunch of bills that got through in the legislative session. There's more, but we're limited by time. But one of them that we do want to talk about is the Veteran and Armed Service Member Suicide Reporting. And this requires Maryland Health Department to provide statistics on suicides by veterans and active duty personnel. Why is that so important, Dana?
Well, I'd like just to begin and say it's really an honor to represent the department on the Governor's Commission on Suicide Prevention, and we have just recently launched a number of constituent-specific task forces, one of which that was recently created is the Service Member, Veteran, and Families Task Force, of which I currently chair. Maryland is currently home to approximately 390,000 veterans, not all of whom are enrolled in actively receiving health care services through the federal VA. Only about 40% currently are.
Wow.
So it's really important that we are able to identify those veterans who are most at risk, which is going to help us in guiding our programming and how we design our outreach strategies moving into the future. So as it relates to House Bill 1159, which was introduced by Delegate Young, this particular bill now requires that the Health Department publish an annual report on the number of veterans who die by suicide each year. Now, that is a complex issue as it relates to reporting, family disclosure that the individual had served, but it provides to us a baseline, a number with which to work as we, again, develop strategies moving forward to ensure that we're getting information into the hands of the veteran community and their families on mental health services that are offered within the VA healthcare system as well as the community.
And this is such a concerning topic because, whether it's 20 or 22, and there are those two numbers I've seen, veterans dying daily by suicide. In 2014, this is coming from a 2016 report by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, a total of 89 veteran suicides in Maryland. The rates are astronomical. It shouldn't be. People are suffering. You want to ensure that these people are getting help, and this gives you an idea of how to help them.
And an interesting statistic to have an awareness of is that the majority of veterans who die by suicide each year were not actively involved in VA healthcare. So that brings me back to the education piece and the awareness piece and educating more veterans on how to enroll and encouraging them to become active in that healthcare system so that if there are mental health issues, they can be identified early and more veterans can get into care.
Secretary Owings is handing me a note that says estimated vet population in 2017 for Maryland, 389,000 veterans were World War II, 10,000, Korea, 22,000, Vietnam, 116,000, Gulf War, 43,000, post 9/11, 58,000. Your era definitely has the large majority there. I think as sometimes we get older, we don't know what to do with our lives. And it is some of those older veterans that we need to be cognizant of.
Well, as they lose their spouse, their life mate, as the family ages with them and goes their own way, they don't have the time to spend with the older veteran. They find themselves alone, and they find themselves in states of depression. But Dana has hit in a very important issue here, and that is without treatment that they've never needed until now, they're going down a different path than we would hope that they would follow.
And one of the things you do, that Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs does, is help file for veterans benefits. Even if those that don't know that they needed it before, guess what? Times change, health changes, and some of those benefits that you could need could have been brought on by your service in the military, yes?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the one thing that I really want to stress is that our benefits and services program really prides itself on ensuring that claims that are filed are of high quality as opposed to quantity. We want to ensure that we are setting a veteran up for success. And having sat in on the claims process in the past with some veterans filing for benefits, I can tell you that if a veteran walks in to meet with one of our service officers and says, I want to file for A, B, and C, our service officers do a very thorough review of military personnel records, and we'll have that conversation with the veteran. Have you considered filing for post-traumatic stress? Have you considered filing for traumatic brain injury?
It's interesting. On your Facebook page, thus far this year, our service program has received a total of 2,505 VA decisions, with 2,235 of those claims being granted. This equates to an 89% approval rate. That's crazy good.
That's very good. That's we're very proud, as Dana said. We're very proud of the job that all 5 of our programs do collectively. Each one stands alone, but together we are a very strong force for the veteran community. We really are.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, more about that strong force. This is Donna Kohl on the 1430 Connection. We will be right back. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Kohl. In the studio with me is Secretary George W. Owings III. He's the Secretary of Maryland's Department of Veterans Affairs. And Dana Hendrickson, she's the Director of Outreach and Advocacy for the agency. We were just talking at break very quickly. Once upon a time, when you were processed out of the military, and I'm not sure how it is now, the job of the Veterans Administration itself was to keep their budget intact and give you very little if you needed it. I don't know if that's changed, but what I do know is that organizations have sprung up in recent years, and your agency does it, that say, no, this person requires some money to pay for their medical expenses. This person needs this money. They deserve this money. Yes?
Yes, Don. In fact, that's the basis of the benefits and services program. What we call the CMP, the compensation and pension side of things, is what we strive for. It's amazing how many veterans actually don't even know what's wrong with them. Now, I'm a prime example. When I got out November 15, 1968, all I wanted to do was leave that gate. I wanted to leave that gate well behind me. I wanted to get away, get out, take my uniforms off, bury them, burn them, get rid of them, and return to civilian life. Right. Well, as time went on, there were things that were popping up. Let me give you a quick example, and you know this to be true. When Agent Orange was finally diagnosed as what it was, the VA itself opposed recognizing a presumption. If you were in or near any defoliant that was sprayed on you, whether you were in the Mekong Delta, on the river, running a riverboat, whether you were in the jungles or the highlands, wherever you were, right. You didn't know it until 20 years later. And yet the VA raised a fervor about, no, it's not connected in any way. Well, Dow Chemical obviously finally admitted what was in the defoliant, the dioxin that it contained, and all of these cancers have sprung up over all of these years. And finally, they acknowledged it. So the presumption was there, and they put, as I remember, $60 million in a pot. That didn't even begin to touch where we are today. Because if you read The Veteran, the magazine from the BVA, every month I read that, or every quarter, I look for names that I served with, and the names of people that I served with, because we're still dying. And so, yeah, the VA will resist. And a better example of that is what happened down at Camp Lejeune. The water that was at Camp Lejeune going back all to the late 50s and early 60s, finally they came around. So there's a list of 7 presumptive illnesses now that can be directly connected to the water, to the veteran, to the veteran's family, and to the children of the veterans that were stationed there.
So if you weren't at Camp Lejeune, if you weren't exposed to Agent Orange, there's a million other issues that come.
Well, that just addresses my era and the war that I was engaged in. If you moving forward, fast forward, Desert Storm, Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places that you and I don't even know about, where the veterans came back a little differently than when they left here.
Let me ask you a question. As we see the number of veterans dwindling, as we see our society moving from a bunch of politicians that were once veterans that aren't anymore, as we see news media that don't have any veterans in their organizations, do you think we're changing as a society and understanding the importance, the role of the military, and as a result, maybe not respecting it as much as we once did?
Well, I don't know if that's actually the case. Technology today allows us to drop bombs from a place down in Port Tobacco, thousands and thousands of miles away. So it's the nature of combat today that is so different than what it was, and yet we still have boots on the ground and we still have combatants going face to face. I don't know if I can say there's a dwindling of respect. I think that pitch is still pretty high, and we'll know this coming in 2 weeks, Memorial Day, of course, which is right on our doorstep.
Yeah, and let's talk about Memorial Day, because that's important. You have a variety of different events being held, including right up the road here at the Annapolis World War II Memorial on May 28th at 11 a.m. The Anne Arundel County Veterans Affairs Commission and American Legion Post 141 hosting a special 2018 Memorial Day event with guest speaker Heather Shreve. She's the author of Once a Colonel. What did you want to add about Memorial Day?
This is one of our 2 biggest days, as you know, November the 11th being the second, which is Veterans Day, Armistice Day, or whatever. And I use this to me because I have very close ties to the wall with people that I grew up with people that I was in school with, and things of that nature. And it's said that a veteran or that a soldier, using that generically, actually dies twice. The first time is the physical death when they're killed in battle or whatever. And the second death occurs the last time their name is spoken. And there's a lot of truth in that. And so anytime I've been speaking lately, I ask a question: how many women were killed in combat in Vietnam? Well, there were 8 nurses that died in Vietnam, but there's only one that died in direct combat. And her name was Sharon Ann Lane. And she was from Illinois. She was 29 years old. She was a nurse, a first lieutenant. And in fact, the irony is she was at the hospital on the base that I left when I departed Vietnam in Chu Lai. Well, that hospital wasn't there when I was there. But in any event, a mortar round came in, a mortar attack took place, and she and her patient were killed instantly. 29 years old, she died on the 9th of June, 1969.
Sharon Lane.
Sharon Ann Lane, and I evoke her name for that very reason.
So we remember.
Because she's the only woman that was killed in direct combat or as a result of combat operations. Mm-hmm. Now, there were 7 other nurses that perished, accidents, illness, or whatever, but she's the only woman on that wall that died in combat.
So Memorial Day, to remember the people that have sacrificed their lives for us.
More than that, if you knew no one who died in that war, find a name of someone who did die, and on Memorial Day, say that name throughout the day to yourself. Better yet, say it aloud and hope somebody asks you, well, who is that? And that's just in Vietnam now.
Right.
All the wars since then, the Iraqi war soldiers, the Afghanistan war soldiers, and anybody else in any war that died, World War II, World War I. Just remember those who did give us our freedoms today, because you did touch on something. It does have a tendency to get away from us if you don't have anybody in the family or close to you that did perish. But, you know, there's millions that did.
The website for the Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs is?
veterans.maryland.gov, G-O-V as in Victor.
Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
This is Donna Kohl on the 1430 Connection. We will see you next week.